3rd May, Bistritz. Left Munich at 8:35 p.m. on 1st May, arriving at Vienna early next morning. Should have arrived at 6:46, but train was an hour late. Budapest seems a wonderful place, from the glimpse which I got of it from the train and the little I could walk through the streets. I feared to go very far from the station, as we had arrived late and would start as near the correct time as possible. The impression I had was that we were leaving the west and entering the east. The most western of splendid bridges over the Danube, which is here of noble width and depth, took us among the traditions of Turkish rule. We left in pretty good time, and came after nightfall to Klausenburg. Here I stopped for the night at the Hotel Royal. I had for dinner, or rather supper, a chicken done up some way with red pepper, which was very good but thirsty. Mem, get recipe for Mina. I asked the waiter, and he said it was called paprika Händel, and that, as it was a national dish, I should be able to get it anywhere along the Carpathians. I found my smattering of German very useful here. Indeed, I don't know how I should be able to get on without it. Having had some time at my disposal when in London, I had visited the British Museum and made search among the books and maps in the library regarding Transylvania, as it had struck me that some foreknowledge of the country could hardly fail to have some importance in dealing with a nobleman of that country. I find that the district he named is in the extreme east of the country, just on the borders of 3 states, Transylvania, Moldavia, and Bukovina, in the midst of the Carpathian Mountains, one of the wildest and least known portions of Europe. I was not able to light on any map or work giving the exact locality of the Castle Dracula, as there are no maps of this country as yet to compare with our own Ordnance Survey maps, but I found that Bistritz, the post town named by Count Dracula, is a fairly well-known place. I shall enter here some of my notes, as they may refresh my memory when I talk over my travels with Mina. In the population of Transylvania, there are 4 distinct nationalities: Saxons in the south, and mixed with them the Wallachs, who are the descendants of the Dacians, Magyars in the west, and Sekelists in the east and north. I am going among the latter, who claim to be descended from Attila and the Huns. This may be so, for when the Magyars conquered the country in the 11th century, they found the Huns settled in it. I read that every known superstition in the world is gathered into the horseshoe of the Carpathians, as if it were the center of some sort of imaginative whirlpool. If so, my stay may be very interesting. Memorial. I must ask the Count all about them. I did not sleep well, though my bed was comfortable enough, for I had all sorts of queer dreams. There was a dog howling all night under my window, which may have had something to do with it, or it may have been the paprika, for I had to drink up all the water in my carafe and was still thirsty. Towards morning I slept and was wakened by the continuous knocking at my door, so I guess I must have been sleeping soundly then. I had for breakfast more paprika and a sort of porridge of maize flour which they said was mamaliga, and eggplant stuffed with forcemeat, a very excellent dish which they call impletata. Mem, get recipe for this also. I had to hurry breakfast, for the train started a little before 8. Or rather, it ought to have done so, for after rushing to the station at 7:30, I had to sit in the carriage for more than an hour before we began to move. It seems to me that the further east you go, the more unpunctual are the trains. What ought they to be in China? All day long, we seemed to dawdle through a country which was full of beauty of every kind. Sometimes we saw little towns or castles on the top of steep hills, such as we see in old missals. Sometimes we ran by rivers and streams, which seemed from the wide stony margin on each side of them to be subject to great floods. It takes a lot of water, and running strong, to sweep the outside edge of a river clear. At every station there were groups of people, sometimes crowds, and in all sorts of attire. Some of them were just like the peasants at home, or those I saw coming through France and Germany, with short jackets and round hats and homemade trousers. But others were very picturesque. The women looked pretty, except when you got near them, but they were very clumsy about the waist. They had all full white sleeves of some kind or other, and most of them had big belts with a lot of strips of something fluttering from them, like the dresses in a ballet. But of course, there were petticoats under them. The strangest figures we saw were the Slovaks, who were more barbarian than the rest, with their big cowboy hats, great baggy dirty white trousers, white linen shirts, and enormous heavy leather belts, nearly a foot wide, all studded over with brass nails. They wore high boots with their trousers tucked into them and had long black hair and heavy black mustaches. They are very picturesque, but do not look prepossessing. On the stage, they would be set down at once as some old oriental band of brigands. They are, however, I am told, very harmless and rather wanting in natural self-assertion. It was on the dark side of twilight when we got to Bistritz, which is a very interesting old place. Being practically on the frontier, for the Borgo Pass leads from it into Bukovina, it has had a very stormy existence, and it certainly shows marks of it. 50 years ago, a series of great fires took place, which made terrible havoc on 5 separate occasions. I was evidently expected, for when I got near the door, I faced a cheery-looking elderly woman in the usual peasant dress, white undergarment with long double apron, front and back, of colored stuff fitting almost too tight for modesty. When I came close, she bowed and said, "The Herr Englishman?" "Yes," I said. "Jonathan Harker." She smiled and gave some message to an elderly man in white shirt sleeves who had followed her to the door. He went, but immediately returned with a letter. The letter was from Count Dracula, and its contents were as follows. My friend, welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you. Sleep well tonight. At 3 tomorrow, the diligence will start for Bukovina. A place on it is kept for you. At the Borgo Pass, my carriage will await you and will bring you to me. I trust that your journey from London has been a happy one, and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend, Dracula 4th May, I found that my landlord had got a letter from the Count, directing him to secure the best place on the coach for me. But on making inquiries as to details, he seemed somewhat reticent and pretended that he could not understand my German. This could not be true, because up to then he had understood it perfectly. At least he answered my questions exactly as if he did. He and his wife, the old lady who had received me, looked at each other in a frightened sort of way. He mumbled out that the money had been sent in advance and that it was all right. I could hardly get him to speak at all. When I asked him any question, he answered me in monosyllables, and the old lady said in excellent German, "It is so strange that the noble gentleman should come to such a place." She said this in a half-whisper, as though she feared that she might be overheard. I could not help feeling a little annoyed at this, for there was obviously something behind their reticence, and that they acted as though they were afraid of me. I asked the landlord to tell me what they feared, but he would not answer, or else pretended not to understand, and his wife looked at me in a frightened, pitying way, as if she did not want to say too much. However, I am not to be put off, and I shall ask the Count about it. When we were drinking our coffee, and the old lady came up to me and whispered in my ear, "Must you go? Oh, young Herr, must you go?" She was in such evident distress that I tried to comfort her, but without effect. Finally, she went down on her knees and implored me not to go, at least to wait a day or two before starting. It was all very ridiculous, but I did not feel comfortable. However, there was business to be done, and I could allow nothing to interfere with it. I tried to raise her up and said, as gravely as I could, that I thanked her, but my duty was imperative, and that I must go. She then rose and dried her eyes, and taking a crucifix from her neck, offered it to me. I did not know what to do, for as an English churchman, I have been taught to regard such things as in some measure idolatrous, and yet it seemed so ungracious to refuse an old lady, meaning so well and in such a state of mind. She saw, I suppose, the doubt in my face, for she put the rosary round my neck and said, "For your mother's sake," and went out of the room. I am writing up this part of the diary whilst I am waiting for the coach, which is, of course, late, and the crucifix is still round my neck. Whether it is the old lady's fear, or the many ghostly traditions of this place, or the crucifix itself, I do not know, but I am not feeling nearly as easy in my mind as usual. If this book should ever reach Mina before I do, let it bring my goodbye. Here comes the coach. 5 May. The coach arrived late, and with it a crowd of people, all in the usual picturesque attire. When it was on the point of starting, the crowd closed round the coach and began to talk excitedly, pointing to me and the usual luggage. The coachman was encouraged by some of the people to take me, but others seemed to oppose him. He was evidently afraid of something, for he kept crossing himself, shaking his head and muttering prayers. Just as he was about to climb into the box after having lashed the horses, he stopped and came back to my window. He whispered to me in excellent German, "Are you sure you want to go to the Borgo Pass?" When I said I was, he turned again, and without a word, he shook his head in a sort of silent protest. Then he climbed to his seat, and we started off slowly. At first I could hear the driver and the others talking a lot in loud voices, but after a while I could no longer distinguish any words, and the sense of being alone in the night began to weigh upon me. Then the mountains began to rise around us. We were entering the Borgo Pass, a narrow gorge with steep cliffs on either side. The night grew darker and darker, and soon the only light was from the flickering lamps of the coach and the stars overhead. The air became colder, and I wrapped my coat tightly around me. The horses seemed to sense something unnatural, for they grew restless and uneasy. Suddenly a strange sight appeared ahead, a carriage with black horses, driven by a tall man in a long cloak. He motioned for the coach to stop. The coachman, pale with fear, quickly obeyed, and I was transferred to the other carriage. The tall man helped me in, his grip strong and cold. Without a word, he climbed into the driver's seat, and we sped off into the night. The speed was incredible. It felt as though the horses were flying rather than running. The sound of wolves howling echoed through the mountains, growing louder and closer. At one point, I looked out and saw their glowing eyes in the darkness, following us like ghostly flames. The journey seemed endless, but at last we stopped in front of a massive gate. The driver descended, and with a strength I found surprising, swung the heavy gates open. Beyond was a dark, forbidding castle silhouetted against the night sky. "Welcome to my house," said the tall man in a deep, resonant voice as he opened the carriage door. "Enter freely and of your own will." I stepped out, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the cold night air. The man extended his hand, which was ice cold, and helped me inside. "You must be Count Dracula," I said. He bowed slightly. "I am Dracula. Welcome to my home, Mr. Harker." As the heavy doors closed behind me, I felt as though I had entered a prison rather than a home. 6 May. I have now been in the castle for several hours, and I am beginning to feel more and more that I am the victim of some dark plot. Count Dracula is a strange and unsettling man. His appearance is almost grotesque, tall, thin, with sharp, wolfish features and piercing eyes that seem to look right through me. Despite this, he is very courteous, and he tries to make me feel welcome. His manners are strangely formal, and at times I get the sense that he is studying me. I have been shown to a room with a large, heavy wooden door and a window that opens onto the wild, barren mountains. The furniture is old and carved with intricate designs, but there is an odd, musty smell in the air, as though the room has been closed up for years. The bed is large and covered in rich, dark fabrics, but there is something uncomfortable about it, something unsettling that I can't quite place. Dracula assured me that I would be well taken care of, and I was given a large supper, consisting mostly of meats and breads, along with wine. I must admit that I was not very hungry, but I ate because I did not want to appear rude. After supper, the Count sat with me for a while, discussing his plans for my stay. He is most eager to see the completion of the legal work for his property in England, but he also seems strangely interested in me as a person. He kept asking me questions about my life, my family, and my country. At first, I thought this was a normal inquiry, but as the conversation wore on, I began to feel as though he was probing for something more, something personal. When I tried to get some sleep, I found it difficult to relax. I am in a room with no other inhabitants, and there are no servants to be seen. The only people I have encountered in the castle are the Count and his strange servant, who speaks no English. I decided to explore the castle this morning, hoping to find some answers to the mystery surrounding Dracula and his strange behavior. The hallways are long and winding, filled with ancient tapestries and furniture, but I found no one else. The castle is vast and labyrinthine, and I cannot help but feel lost in its shadowy corridors. In one of the rooms, I found a large library filled with books in many languages. Dracula has a vast collection of works in English, French, German, and Hungarian. Some of the books are old and covered in dust, while others are newly bound. I have been allowed to borrow some of the books, and I plan to spend my evenings reading them in order to pass the time. But I cannot shake the feeling that something is wrong here. There is a pervasive sense of dread that hangs in the air. I have heard strange noises coming from the depths of the castle, and I sometimes feel as though I am being watched. When I look out of the window, I see nothing but darkness and the vast mountains. There is no sign of life, no birds, no animals, and no sign of movement anywhere. 7th May. I have been unable to sleep. The strange events of the past day have only deepened the sense of unease that I feel here in the castle. Last night, Dracula came to visit me in my room, and his manner was unsettling. His eyes gleamed in the darkness, and his movement was as silent as a shadow. He spoke to me in a low, almost hypnotic voice, urging me to rest and telling me that I was safe in his care. Yet there was something chilling in his words, a certain coldness in his manner that filled me with dread. I have begun to notice other oddities around the castle. The air is always heavy with a strange stillness, as though the very walls of the place are holding their breath. The doors creak as though they have not been opened in years, and the windows are always covered with thick, heavy curtains, blocking out the light. This morning, when I ventured out again, I found that the Count had arranged for me to see more of the castle. The halls are adorned with strange, ancient artifacts, swords, shields, and tapestries depicting battles and dark ceremonies. As I walked through the various rooms, I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched from the shadows. At one point, I came upon a door that was locked, but it seemed to be calling to me, drawing me in. I tried the door, but it would not budge. The strange servant of the Count appeared behind me, his eyes wide and nervous. He motioned for me to follow him and led me away. I asked the Count about the locked door, but he merely smiled and said that it was a room of no importance. He assured me that I would have no reason to enter it and that there was nothing to concern myself with. But I could not shake the feeling that there was something hidden behind that door, something that was being kept from me. In the afternoon, I went outside to get some air. The castle is situated on a high peak, and the view is breathtaking, with steep cliffs and the sprawling forest below. However, I soon found that there was no way down from the castle, no path leading anywhere. The only way to go was back through the castle. As I walked along the parapets, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in the distance, I saw a figure standing in the shadows of the trees, pale and gaunt, with a strange, unnatural appearance. It seemed to be watching me. I quickly turned away, my heart pounding in my chest. Later in the day, I sat down to write this entry. I have a feeling that something is going terribly wrong. I don't know how much longer I can stay in this place. The Count's strange behavior and the oppressive atmosphere are beginning to get to me. I feel as though I am trapped here, unable to escape. 8 May. During the day, I find myself increasingly alone. There are no servants in the castle, and I never see the Count during daylight hours. When he does appear, it is always at night, and even then, he seems to move as though he is part of the shadows themselves. Today, I noticed another strange thing. There are no mirrors in the castle. When I asked the Count about it, he simply laughed and said that mirrors were of no use to him. However, I had brought a small shaving mirror with me, and this morning, as I was preparing to shave, something deeply unsettling occurred. The Count entered the room silently, as he often does, and I was startled to see him standing directly behind me. Yet, as I looked into the mirror, I realized with a chill that there was no reflection of him. Only the room itself appeared in the glass, empty behind me. I turned to look at him directly, and there he stood, smiling in that unnerving way of his. My hands shook so much that I accidentally cut myself with the razor. A single drop of blood fell, and the Count's eyes blazed with a strange, hungry light. For a moment, I thought he was going to leap at me, but he quickly composed himself. 8 May. During the day, I find myself increasingly alone. There are no servants in the castle, and I never see the Count during daylight hours. When he does appear, it is always at night, and even then, he seems to move as though he is part of the shadows themselves. Today, I noticed another strange thing. There are no mirrors in the castle. When I asked the Count about it, he simply laughed and said that mirrors were of no use to him. However, I had brought a small shaving mirror with me, and this morning, as I was preparing to shave, something deeply unsettling occurred. The Count entered the room silently, as he often does, and I was startled to see him standing directly behind me. Yet, as I looked into the mirror, I realized with a chill that there was no reflection of him. Only the room itself appeared in the glass, empty behind me. I turned to look at him directly, and there he stood, smiling in that unnerving way of his. My hands shook so much that I accidentally cut myself with the razor. A single drop of blood fell, and the Count's eyes blazed with a strange, hungry light. For a moment, I thought he was going to leap at me, but he quickly composed himself. "Take care," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "This is a dangerous place and accidents can happen." He reached out to touch my neck, but then he seemed to think better of it and withdrew. He left the room abruptly, and I was left alone, trembling. After this incident, I have resolved to keep my shaving mirror with me at all times, and I have begun to carry my crucifix in my pocket. Later that night, the Count and I sat together in his library, where he questioned me further about England. He is particularly interested in the city of London, its people, its streets, and its customs. He seems to take a peculiar delight in the idea of blending in among the bustling crowds. He spoke of his plans to move there, describing it as a place of infinite possibilities. "In the crowded streets of your London," he said, "I shall be but a stranger in a strange land. No one will notice me, no one will question me. I shall walk among them, unseen and unknown." His words sent a shiver down my spine, though I could not say why. There is something deeply sinister about the way he speaks of London, as though he has some terrible plan in mind. 9th May. I have made a terrifying discovery. While exploring the castle earlier today, I came across a room that seemed to have been left in disarray. In one corner, I found a pile of earth, and in the dim light, I could see that it was moving slightly, as though it were alive. Later, I returned to the library, where I found books about the folklore of Transylvania. They speak of strange creatures, vampires who feed on the blood of the living and can only move freely at night. They are said to have no reflection in mirrors, to shun garlic and holy symbols, and to be unable to cross running water. Could it be possible that Count Dracula is one of these creatures? The thought is almost too terrible to bear, but the evidence is mounting. I am trapped here, with no way to escape. The Count holds the keys to every door, and the castle is surrounded by sheer cliffs. I must find a way out before it is too late. 15 May. When the Count left me last night, I locked the door and prepared for sleep. The strange events of the past days have worn heavily on me, and my mind feels clouded. However, sleep did not come easily. I lay awake, haunted by the wolves howling and the unsettling feeling of being watched. In the early hours of the morning, I heard a sound like distant laughter, soft, mocking, and echoing through the vast halls of the castle. I got up and tried to look out of my window, but the darkness was impenetrable. I returned to bed, but the sense of dread lingered. 16th May. The Count continues to interrogate me about England, asking endless questions about its geography, its people, and its legal systems. He seems particularly fascinated by details of property ownership and legal procedures. Each time I try to steer the conversation elsewhere, he redirects it with an almost predatory intensity. Today, I broached the subject of leaving the castle. The Count's response was calm but firm. "You will remain here as long as I require your assistance." His words were polite, but there was an undeniable menace in his tone. After our conversation, I attempted to explore the castle again. This time, I ventured further into the forbidden areas. I discovered rooms filled with cobwebs and dust, their furnishings decayed and unused for centuries. In one such room, I came across a large ancient chest. Inside, I found more piles of earth, like the one I had seen earlier. 17th May. I am now certain that I am a prisoner. This morning, I tried the doors and windows of the castle again, but they were all locked or barred. The Count is the only one with the keys, and he seems to take a perverse pleasure in my growing desperation. Tonight, I witnessed something that has shaken me to my core. I was looking out of my window when I saw the Count leave the castle. At first, I thought he was using a hidden door, but then I realized the truth. He was climbing down the sheer wall of the castle, moving like a lizard, his cloak billowing behind him. The sight was so unnatural that I nearly cried out, but fear silenced me. How can a man move in such a way? And what is he doing outside at night? 18th May. I have spent the day trying to piece together the truth about the Count. The books in his library speak of dark legends and ancient curses, and I am beginning to understand that he is no ordinary man. The Count appeared again tonight, and his behavior was even more unsettling. He stood close to me, his eyes fixed on mine with a hypnotic intensity. He spoke of his desire to understand and adapt to the ways of England, but his words carried a hidden menace. "I wish to know all," he said, "so that I may move among your people unseen, like a shadow in the night." His words filled me with dread, but I dared not show my fear. 19th May. I have discovered something truly horrifying. This afternoon, I ventured into a part of the castle I had not explored before. In a dark, cold chamber, I found several large wooden boxes filled with earth. As I examined them, I realized that they were not just storage, they were coffins. One of the boxes was slightly open, and inside I saw the Count. He lay motionless, his pale face stark against the dark soil. His eyes were closed, but there was a strange vitality in his appearance, as though he were merely resting, waiting for nightfall. I fled the room, my heart pounding. There can be no doubt now, Count Dracula is a vampire. 20th May. I am trapped in this nightmare with no hope of escape. The Count grows more sinister with each passing day, and the castle feels like a tomb. I must find a way out, or I fear I will never leave this place alive. Tonight I heard the wolves howling again, their cries echoing through the darkness. It felt as though they were calling to me, mocking my helplessness. I have resolved to act. Tomorrow, I will confront the Count and demand my freedom. If he refuses, I will find another way to escape, even if it means risking my life. 24th May. I have been in the castle for what feels like an eternity. Time has lost meaning here, and the days blend into nights. My attempts to confront the Count have been futile. Each time I raise the subject of leaving, his piercing eyes silence me, and I feel as though my will is being drained away. This morning I decided to make one final attempt to escape. I climbed out of my window and scaled the castle wall, retracing the path I had seen Dracula take. The descent was terrifying. The stones were cold and slippery, and I felt as though unseen forces were pulling me back. When I reached the ground, I found myself in the castle's courtyard. The space was overgrown with weeds and filled with strange, broken statues. At the far end, I discovered a heavy wooden door. It was locked, but I managed to force it open with a piece of broken stone. Inside, I found what I can only describe as a crypt. Rows of coffins lined the walls, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. In the center of the room stood a massive, ornate coffin. I approached it cautiously, and when I lifted the lid, I found Dracula himself. He lay there, his eyes closed, his face pale but eerily serene. The sight filled me with both terror and rage. I picked up a heavy piece of wood, intending to drive it through his heart, but as I raised my arm, his eyes snapped open. Before I could act, I was thrown back by an unseen force. The Count rose from the coffin, his movements swift and unnatural. He stared at me with a fury that froze me in place. "You dare!" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "Do you think you can escape me?" I fled the crypt and returned to my room, my heart pounding. I know now that I cannot defeat him alone. 25th May. Dracula is preparing to leave the castle. I have seen him loading boxes of earth onto a wagon, and I overheard him speaking to his servant in a strange, guttural language. He plans to travel to England, and I fear what he will do when he arrives there. I am more determined than ever to escape and warn the world about the danger he poses. Tonight, I will attempt to climb down the castle wall again, this time with a rope I fashioned from the bed sheets in my room. If I fail, I fear it will mean my death. 24th May. I have been in the castle for what feels like an eternity. Time has lost meaning here, and the days blend into nights. My attempts to confront the Count have been futile. Each time I raise the subject of leaving, his piercing eyes silence me, and I feel as though my will is being drained away. This morning, I decided to make one final attempt to escape. I climbed out of my window and scaled the castle wall, retracing the path I had seen Dracula take. The descent was terrifying. The stones were cold and slippery, and I felt as though unseen forces were pulling me back. When I reached the ground, I found myself in the castle's courtyard. The space was overgrown with weeds and filled with strange, broken statues. At the far end, I discovered a heavy wooden door. It was locked, but I managed to force it open with a piece of broken stone. Inside, I found what I can only describe as a crypt. Rows of coffins lined the walls, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. In the center of the room stood a massive, ornate coffin. I approached it cautiously, and when I lifted the lid, I found Dracula himself. He lay there, his eyes closed, his face pale but eerily serene. The sight filled me with both terror and rage. I picked up a heavy piece of wood, intending to drive it through his heart, but as I raised my arm, his eyes snapped open. Before I could act, I was thrown back by an unseen force. The Count rose from the coffin, his movements swift and unnatural. He stared at me with a fury that froze me in place. "You dare!" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "Do you think you can escape me?" I fled the crypt and returned to my room, my heart pounding. I know now that I cannot defeat him alone. 25th May. Dracula is preparing to leave the castle. I have seen him loading boxes of earth onto a wagon, and I overheard him speaking to his servant in a strange, guttural language. He plans to travel to England, and I fear what he will do when he arrives there. I am more determined than ever to escape and warn the world about the danger he poses. Tonight, I will attempt to climb down the castle wall again, this time with a rope I fashioned from the bed sheets in my room. If I fail, I fear it will mean my death. 27th May. I made my escape last night, but at great cost. As I descended the wall, I slipped and fell into the river below. The icy water carried me far from the castle, and I washed ashore near a small village. The locals found me and took me in, but I am weak and feverish. I have told them nothing of what I have seen. Who would believe me? They speak in hushed tones about the castle and its master, but I can see the fear in their eyes. I must return to England and warn Mina. Dracula is on his way, and I cannot let him bring his evil to my homeland. 24th July. Whitby is a charming town, and I feel fortunate to be staying here while Jonathan is away. The air is fresh, the scenery is beautiful, and the people are kind. Lucy and I have been enjoying our walks along the cliffs and through the quaint streets. The view of the old abbey ruins is especially striking, though there is something haunting about them in the moonlight. Lucy has been in excellent spirits, though her health worries me at times. She has always been delicate, and lately, she seems more prone to bouts of exhaustion. She insists she is fine, but I can't help but notice the dark circles under her eyes. This morning, Lucy and I climbed the 199 steps to the churchyard. From there, we could see the harbor and the vast, restless sea. While we were there, we met an old man named Mr. Swales, a local who enjoys telling stories about Whitby's history. He spoke of shipwrecks, ghostly legends, and the strange things that have happened here over the years. One tale in particular caught my attention. He mentioned a strange ship that once arrived in Whitby with its crew missing, and a dog that leaped ashore and vanished. His words left a chill in the air, though he laughed them off as nonsense. 25th of July. I am so happy to have Mina here with me. Her company is a great comfort, and her letters from Jonathan are filled with love and longing. I can see how deeply she cares for him, and I hope they will soon be reunited. Last night, I had the strangest dream. I felt as though I were standing on the cliffs, watching the sea. The wind was cold, and I could hear the distant howling of wolves, though I know there are none in this part of England. I woke feeling drained and unsettled as though something had been taken from me. When I told Mina about the dream, she dismissed it as a product of my imagination, but I cannot shake the feeling that it was something more. 26th July. A strange event occurred last night. A storm rolled in from the sea, sudden and violent. The winds howled and the waves crashed against the shore with tremendous force. Lucy and I watched from the window as lightning illuminated the abbey ruins. Amid the storm, a ship appeared on the horizon. It seemed to be in distress, its sails tattered and its movements erratic. As it drew closer, we saw that it was unmanned, save for a large black dog that leaped ashore as soon as the ship ran aground. The dog disappeared into the darkness, and the ship's hold was found to contain only boxes of earth. The townspeople are abuzz with speculation, but no one can explain the ship's arrival. Mr. Swales, the old man from the churchyard, looked deeply troubled when we told him about it. 27th July. My patient Renfield has been behaving even more strangely than usual. His mania has intensified, and he has developed a peculiar obsession with consuming living creatures. He catches flies and spiders, then feeds the spiders to birds, muttering all the while about life and blood. When I asked him about his behavior, he spoke cryptically of a master who would soon arrive. His words were disjointed, but they carried a strange, almost prophetic weight. I cannot help but feel that Renfield's condition is connected to the strange occurrences in Whitby. There is an air of unease, as though something dark is approaching. 28th July. Lucy has been sleepwalking again. Last night I woke to find her bed empty. I searched the house in a panic, only to find her standing on the cliff's edge, her arms outstretched as though she were welcoming someone. I called to her, and she turned to me with a look of confusion, as though she did not know how she had gotten there. I brought her back inside and put her to bed, but I am deeply worried. Her health seems to be deteriorating, and there are strange marks on her neck, 2 small punctures as though made by an insect. She insists they are nothing, but I cannot help but fear the worst. Chapter 6. Mina Murray's Journal. 1st August. Lucy's condition has worsened significantly. She is pale and weak, and her sleepwalking episodes are becoming more frequent. Each time, I find her in the same spot, on the cliff, facing the sea, as if in a trance. The marks on her neck have not healed and seem to trouble her more with each passing day. I tried to cover them with garlic flowers after reading about their supposed protective properties in an old book I found. But Lucy recoiled at the smell and begged me to remove them. I have written to Dr. Seward, an old friend of Lucy's, asking for his advice. He runs an asylum nearby, and I hope he can help us understand what is happening to her. Dr. Seward's Diary. 3rd August. Mina's letter reached me today, and I am deeply concerned. Lucy's symptoms are unlike anything I have encountered before. I have contacted my mentor, Professor Abraham Van Helsing, a specialist in unusual medical conditions, and asked him to come to Whitby. Meanwhile, Renfield's behavior has grown even more erratic. He speaks constantly of a master and has taken to consuming increasingly larger creatures, including birds. Today, he tried to attack me when I removed a jar of flies from his cell. His strength was astonishing, and his eyes burned with an unnatural fervor. I cannot shake the feeling that Renfield's madness is somehow connected to Lucy's illness. 6th August. Professor Van Helsing has arrived, and his presence brings some comfort. He is a man of great knowledge and kindness, though his demeanor is serious, and his eyes betray a deep concern. After examining Lucy, he seemed troubled, but did not reveal his conclusions. He asked that we keep the garlic flowers around her room, and insisted that we keep her windows closed at night. He also began a strange ritual, placing crucifixes and holy water around her bed. Despite his efforts, Lucy's condition continues to deteriorate. She grows weaker each day, and the marks on her neck remain unchanged. I am filled with dread, though I do not understand why. 8th of August. Van Helsing has confided in me his suspicions. Lucy is the victim of a vampire. At first, I thought he was mad, but the evidence he presented was undeniable. The marks on her neck, her aversion to garlic and religious symbols, her nocturnal deterioration, all point to one conclusion. He believes that Lucy is being preyed upon by a creature that feeds on her blood, weakening her with each attack. We must act quickly to save her life. Tonight, Van Helsing and I will stand vigil in Lucy's room. If the vampire returns, we will be ready. 9th August. The night was long and filled with terror. Van Helsing and Dr. Seward kept watch over Lucy, and I stayed close by, though I was too frightened to sleep. Around midnight, I thought I saw a shadow move across the wall, though there was no source for it. The air grew cold and Lucy began to stir in her sleep, her breathing shallow and labored. Suddenly, there was a loud bang at the window, as though something had struck it. Van Helsing rushed to the window and threw it open, but there was nothing there. He looked out into the night, his face pale and grim. When he turned back to us, he said only, "The battle has begun." 10th August. Despite our efforts, Lucy grows weaker. Van Helsing has tried blood transfusions to restore her strength, using his own blood and mine. Each time she rallies briefly but then relapses. Van Helsing believes the vampire must be destroyed to save Lucy, but we have no idea where it is hiding. He suspects it is connected to the strange ship that arrived in Whitby and the boxes of earth it carried. We will search for the vampire's lair, but time is running out. Lucy's life hangs by a thread, and I fear we may already be too late. 11th August. Lucy's condition is growing worse by the hour. She is so weak now that she can barely speak, and her skin is deathly pale. Van Helsing has not left her side, and Dr. Seward looks as though he has not slept in days. Tonight, Van Helsing insisted on placing more garlic flowers around Lucy's bed and secured the room with religious symbols. He is desperate, and his concern is palpable. I feel utterly helpless. Watching Lucy fade before my eyes is unbearable, and I cannot escape the sense of doom that hangs over us all. 12th August. Lucy has suffered another attack. Despite our precautions, the vampire found its way into her room. We found her this morning, unconscious, her face ghostly pale, and the marks on her neck fresh. Van Helsing was beside himself with frustration. He muttered about the vampire's cunning and how it must have a stronghold nearby. He is convinced it hides in one of the boxes of earth brought from Transylvania. We are preparing to search for these boxes and destroy them, but Lucy cannot endure much more. If we do not succeed soon, she will succumb. 14th August. Lucy's condition has reached a critical point. She is barely alive, her breaths shallow and labored. Van Helsing and Dr. Seward continue to administer blood transfusions, but it is clear that they are only delaying the inevitable. Tonight, as I sat by her bedside, she opened her eyes and whispered something I could not understand. Her expression was one of sadness and fear, as though she knew her time was near. Van Helsing has warned us to prepare for the worst. My heart is breaking. 15th August. Lucy has passed away. Her death came just before dawn. She opened her eyes one last time and smiled weakly at us. Van Helsing whispered a prayer, and then she was gone. The room was filled with an unnatural stillness, as though something unseen had departed with her. Van Helsing is adamant that we cannot bury her in peace. He believes the vampire has claimed her and that she may rise again. Though the thought horrifies me, I trust his judgment. We will take precautions before her burial, placing garlic and religious symbols around her body. If Van Helsing is correct, we may yet have to face a nightmare worse than we can imagine. 16th August. The grief of losing Lucy is overwhelming. I cannot believe she is gone. She was so full of life, and now her room is silent and empty. Van Helsing and Dr. Seward seem haunted by something they are not telling me. There is a tension between them, as though they are preparing for something terrible. I have decided to leave Whitby and return to London. Perhaps the distance will ease my sorrow. I pray for Jonathan's safe return and hope to find comfort in his arms. 18 August. The unthinkable has happened. Lucy has returned. Late last night, a report came from the churchyard where Lucy was buried. A child had been found, pale and weak, with marks on its neck identical to Lucy's. Witnesses spoke of a white lady seen wandering the area, luring children into the shadows. Van Helsing and I went to Lucy's tomb and found her coffin empty. We waited in the darkness, and just before dawn, we saw her. She was no longer the Lucy we knew. Her face was pale and beautiful, but her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and her lips were stained with blood. Van Helsing approached her with a crucifix, and she recoiled with a hiss, baring her teeth like an animal. She fled into the night, and we were left shaken and horrified. We will return tomorrow with stakes and holy water to put an end to this abomination. 19 August. Tonight, we carried out the dreadful task of releasing Lucy's soul from the vampire's curse. Van Helsing, Arthur, Quincy Morris, and I met at her tomb just before midnight. Arthur was hesitant to take part. He could not reconcile the thought of harming Lucy, even though Van Helsing explained that the creature she had become was not truly her. She is not at rest, Van Helsing said. Her soul is trapped, and we must set her free. When we opened her tomb, The sight that greeted us confirmed Van Helsing's worst fears. Lucy's body was unnaturally preserved, her cheeks flushed as though she were merely sleeping. But her lips were smeared with fresh blood, and her fangs were visible in the moonlight. Arthur was overcome with grief and anger, but he found the strength to do what was necessary. With trembling hands, he drove a stake through her heart as Van Helsing recited prayers. Lucy let out an unearthly scream that echoed through the tomb, then fell silent. When the deed was done, her appearance changed. The unnatural vitality faded, and her face became peaceful. It was as though she had been released from a terrible bondage. Arthur wept as Van Helsing comforted him, assuring him that Lucy's soul was now at rest. We resealed the tomb and left the churchyard, our hearts heavy but resolute. The vampire that had taken Lucy must be destroyed. 20 August. I have returned to London, but my heart remains heavy with grief for Lucy. I received a letter from Dr. Seward informing me of her passing and expressing his condolences. He did not share the details, but his words carried an undertone of urgency and fear. Jonathan has also returned, though he is much changed. He was found wandering the streets of Budapest in a state of delirium, muttering incoherently about a castle and a monstrous figure. He does not remember much of what happened to him, but he gave me his journal, insisting that I read it if anything strange should occur. I have not yet had the courage to open it. 21st August. Van Helsing has gathered our group to begin the hunt for Dracula. We now know that he has come to England, bringing with him the boxes of earth he needs to rest and regain his strength. We must locate these boxes and destroy them to weaken him. Van Helsing believes he has taken refuge in Carfax, an old estate near London that Dracula purchased before leaving Transylvania. Renfield's behavior has become even more erratic. He speaks of his master with reverence and anger, and his mood swings are unpredictable. Van Helsing believes Renfield may have some connection to Dracula, and we are watching him closely for clues. 22nd August. Jonathan has begun to recover, though he is still haunted by his experiences. Last night, he woke in a panic, shouting about a shadow with glowing red eyes. I tried to comfort him, but his fear was palpable. I finally summoned the courage to read his journal. The horrors he described, Dracula's castle, the brides, and the Count himself, chilled me to the bone. I now understand why he was so insistent that I know the truth. I have shared the journal with Van Helsing and the others. They confirmed that the man Jonathan encountered is indeed the vampire we are hunting. We are united in our purpose. We must destroy Dracula before he can harm anyone else. 24th August. Our search of Carfax revealed some of Dracula's lairs. We found several of the boxes of earth, and with Van Helsing's guidance, we consecrated them with holy water and sacred rituals. Dracula will no longer be able to use them. However, our work is far from over. We do not know how many boxes remain, nor where Dracula might be hiding now. Van Helsing believes he will retaliate, and we must be prepared for his attack. Renfield has grown increasingly agitated, pleading to be released and warning us that his master is near. I fear he may try to aid Dracula if given the chance. 25th of August. Tonight, Renfield's behavior reached a terrifying crescendo. He begged to be released from his cell, claiming he had vital information to share. His desperation was so genuine that Van Helsing urged me to listen to him. Renfield revealed that Dracula had been visiting him, promising him life and power in exchange for his loyalty. He described the vampire's ability to enter rooms without sound, his glowing red eyes, and his overwhelming presence. "He is here," Renfield whispered. "He's coming for her." We realized he was referring to Mina. Our hearts sank, and we rushed to protect her. 19 August. Tonight, we carried out the dreadful task of releasing Lucy's soul from the vampire's curse. Van Helsing, Arthur, Quincy Morris, and I met at her tomb just before midnight. Arthur was hesitant to take part. He could not reconcile the thought of harming Lucy, even though Van Helsing explained that the creature she had become was not truly her. "She is not at rest," Van Helsing said. "Her soul is trapped, and we must set her free." When we opened her tomb, the sight that greeted us confirmed Van Helsing's worst fears. Lucy's body was unnaturally preserved, her cheeks flushed as though she were merely sleeping. But her lips were smeared with fresh blood, and her fangs were visible in the moonlight. Arthur was overcome with grief and anger, but he found the strength to do what was necessary. With trembling hands, he drove a stake through her heart as Van Helsing recited prayers. Lucy let out an unearthly scream that echoed through the tomb, then fell silent. When the deed was done, her appearance changed. The unnatural vitality faded, and her face became peaceful. It was as though she had been released from a terrible bondage. Arthur wept as Van Helsing comforted him, assuring him that Lucy's soul was now at rest. We resealed the tomb and left the churchyard, our hearts heavy but resolute. The vampire that had taken Lucy must be destroyed. 20 August. I have returned to London, but my heart remains heavy with grief for Lucy. I received a letter from Dr. Seward informing me of her passing and expressing his condolences. He did not share the details, but his words carried an undertone of urgency and fear. Jonathan has also returned, though he is much changed. He was found wandering the streets of Budapest in a state of delirium, muttering incoherently about a castle and a monstrous figure. He does not remember much of what happened to him, but he gave me his journal, insisting that I read it if anything strange should occur. I have not yet had the courage to open it. 21st August. Van Helsing has gathered our group to begin the hunt for Dracula. We now know that he has come to England, bringing with him the boxes of earth he needs to rest and regain his strength. We must locate these boxes and destroy them to weaken him. Van Helsing believes he has taken refuge in Carfax, an old estate near London that Dracula purchased before leaving Transylvania. Renfield's behavior has become even more erratic. He speaks of his master with reverence and anger, and his mood swings are unpredictable. Van Helsing believes Renfield may have some connection to Dracula, and we are watching him closely for clues. 22nd August. Jonathan has begun to recover, though he is still haunted by his experiences. Last night, he woke in a panic, shouting about a shadow with glowing red eyes. I tried to comfort him, but his fear was palpable. I finally summoned the courage to read his journal. The horrors he described, Dracula's castle, the brides, and the Count himself, chilled me to the bone. I now understand why he was so insistent that I know the truth. I have shared the journal with Van Helsing and the others. They confirmed that the man Jonathan encountered is indeed the vampire we are hunting. We are united in our purpose. We must destroy Dracula before he can harm anyone else. 24th August. Our search of Carfax revealed some of Dracula's lairs. We found several of the boxes of earth, and with Van Helsing's guidance, we consecrated them with holy water and sacred rituals. Dracula will no longer be able to use them. However, our work is far from over. We do not know how many boxes remain, nor where Dracula might be hiding now. Van Helsing believes he will retaliate, and we must be prepared for his attack. Renfield has grown increasingly agitated, pleading to be released and warning us that his master is near. I fear he may try to aid Dracula if given the chance. 25th of August. Tonight, Renfield's behavior reached a terrifying crescendo. He begged to be released from his cell, claiming he had vital information to share. His desperation was so genuine that Van Helsing urged me to listen to him. Renfield revealed that Dracula had been visiting him, promising him life and power in exchange for his loyalty. He described the vampire's ability to enter rooms without sound, his glowing red eyes, and his overwhelming presence. "He is here," Renfield whispered. "He's coming for her." We realized he was referring to Mina. Our hearts sank, and we rushed to protect her. 26th August. Last night was a nightmare beyond words. I awoke to find Jonathan in a deep, unnatural sleep. A strange mist filled the room, and through it, I saw a figure looming over me. It was Dracula. His eyes burned like fire, and his presence froze me in terror. I could not move as he leaned closer, his breath cold against my skin. I felt his teeth pierce my neck, and a strange dizziness overcame me. It was as though he were draining my very soul. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside the door. Van Helsing and the others burst in, armed with crucifixes and holy water. Dracula snarled and vanished into the mist, leaving me weak and trembling. Van Helsing assured me I was not yet fully under Dracula's control. But the marks on my neck are a grim reminder of how close I came to being lost. 27th August. The attack on Mina has redoubled our efforts to destroy Dracula. Van Helsing believes that Dracula has been weakened by the loss of his earth-filled boxes and will attempt to flee back to Transylvania. Renfield's condition deteriorated rapidly after the incident. Today, we found him near death in his cell, his body broken as though he had been attacked. With his last breath, he warned us that Dracula had taken blood from Mina, and that her connection to him was growing stronger. We must act swiftly. Van Helsing has devised a plan to intercept Dracula before he can escape England. 28th August. I am filled with rage and determination. Dracula has harmed Mina, and I will not rest until he is destroyed. We traced his movements to a ship bound for Varna, a port on the Black Sea. With Van Helsing leading us, we have decided to pursue him back to Transylvania. The journey will be long and perilous, but we are resolved to end this nightmare once and for all. Mina, though weakened, insists on coming with us. Van Helsing has taken every precaution to protect her, but he fears that Dracula's influence over her may grow as we near his homeland. 30th of August. The bond between Dracula and me is terrifying. I can feel his presence in my dreams pulling me toward him. Van Helsing has used hypnotism to tap into this connection, hoping it will lead us to him. Under hypnosis, I described a dark, rocking sensation as though I were aboard a ship. I heard the creak of wood and the sound of waves. Van Helsing believes this confirms that Dracula is still at sea. Despite my fear, I am determined to help the others. If this bond can lead us to Dracula, then perhaps it is not entirely a curse. 5th September. We arrived in Varna to find that Dracula had already left. He is traveling by river toward his castle, and we must catch up to him before he reaches his sanctuary. Van Helsing has divided us into two groups. Jonathan, Quincy, and I will travel by boat to intercept Dracula's coffin, while Van Helsing and Mina will take a different route to prepare for the final confrontation. Time is against us, but we are determined. Dracula must not reach his castle. 6th September. Our pursuit of Dracula has become a desperate race. The Count travels swiftly, using the river to evade us. We have learned that he is being transported in his coffin, hidden within a box of earth. If he reaches his castle, he will regain his full strength, and our chances of defeating him will diminish. Quincy and I have taken turns keeping watch as we travel by boat. The nights are long and filled with an oppressive sense of dread. The river seems alive with shadows, and I cannot shake the feeling that Dracula is aware of our pursuit. 7th September. Traveling with Van Helsing has been both reassuring and terrifying. He is kind and protective, but the grim determination in his eyes reminds me of the danger we face. As we near Transylvania, the bond between Dracula and me grows stronger. During my hypnotic trances, I see more clearly now his surroundings, his movements. Last night I described a dark, ancient forest and the sound of wolves howling in the distance. Van Helsing believes this means Dracula is nearing his castle. He has armed me with a crucifix and holy water, insisting that I keep them close at all times. He fears that Dracula may try to claim me fully before we can destroy him. 9th September. We have intercepted news that Dracula's followers are guarding the final leg of his journey. They are loyal and dangerous, determined to ensure his safe passage. Our group is exhausted but resolute. We have vowed to fight to the last to prevent Dracula from reaching his castle. Quincy, ever the brave soul, reminded us that this is not just about vengeance, but about protecting others from the horrors we have witnessed. If we falter now, he said, Dracula will unleash his darkness upon countless innocent lives. His words strengthened our resolve. 10th September. We have reached the Borgo Pass, the final approach to Dracula's castle. The air here is thick with foreboding, and the land itself seems hostile. Wolves howl in the distance, their cries echoing like a mournful dirge. Van Helsing and Mina joined us today. Mina appears pale and weak, but her courage is unshaken. She insisted on being with us for the final confrontation, despite Van Helsing's concerns for her safety. Tonight, we will face Dracula in his castle. We are armed with stakes, holy water, and our unwavering determination. This is our last chance to destroy him. 11th September. The night was a blur of terror and triumph. We reached Dracula's castle just as the sun began to set. His followers were there, fierce and relentless, but we fought our way through them. Quincy and Jonathan displayed extraordinary bravery, cutting down those who stood in our way. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, we found Dracula's coffin in the crypt. He lay within, his eyes closed, his face pale but eerily serene. Van Helsing performed the sacred rites, and Jonathan drove his blade through Dracula's heart. Quincy, despite being gravely wounded in the battle, struck the final blow, severing Dracula's head. The Count let out a final otherworldly scream, and his body crumbled to dust. The castle itself seemed to tremble, as though the land was ridding itself of his evil. 12th September. Dracula is no more. The battle cost us dearly. Quincy Morris, our brave and loyal friend, succumbed to his wounds shortly after the fight. With his dying breath, he looked to Mina and Jonathan and said, "It's over. You're free now." We buried him with honor, his sacrifice ensuring our victory. Mina's connection to Dracula has been severed, and she is beginning to regain her strength. The marks on her neck have disappeared, and the light has returned to her eyes. We will return to our lives, forever changed by what we have endured. But we take solace in knowing that we have rid the world of a great evil. 13th September. As I hold Mina close, I feel a deep sense of gratitude. The horrors we faced will haunt us always, but we have triumphed. Dracula is gone, and the shadow he cast over our lives has been lifted. Though we mourn the loss of our dear friend Quincy, his courage and sacrifice will never be forgotten. We leave Transylvania with heavy hearts, but with hope for the future. Mina and I will cherish every moment we have, knowing how close we came to losing everything. The nightmare is over,